Picture the headline scrolling across your screen last September. The Census Bureau announced that real median household income had reached a new record high. A few weeks later, the Bureau of Labor Statistics confirmed wages were outpacing inflation for the fifth consecutive month. The business sectors celebrated. The American economy, by every official measure, was making people richer. Now picture opening your banking app and watching the available balance get smaller every month despite that raise you negotiated. Picture the creeping realization that you're earning more than you ever have and affording less than before. This is interconnected. Today, we're asking a question the spreadsheets can't answer. If the math says our paychecks are beating inflation, what exactly is eating up our paycheck? I want to introduce you to someone. Her name is Tony. She teaches high school English in Phoenix. And when I asked her about those cheerful income headlines, here's what she told me. Quote, "Every graph insists I'm richer than my mother was, yet my debit card keeps telling me I'm overdrafting the future." Tony isn't an economist. She doesn't parse Federal Reserve statements. She only knows that something fundamental has broken between what the numbers say her life should cost and what it actually costs to live it. Millions of Americans are living inside the same contradiction. There's a widening gap between statistical prosperity and felt precarity. The official story says we're winning. The rent bill says otherwise. So which story is true? What if they're both true simultaneously, revealing something far more complex about how modern economic systems actually work? Today, we're going to trace that gap between a teacher's bank account all the way through the hidden machinery that's quietly rewriting the rules of what a middle-class income can buy. Let's start with what the official numbers actually say, because they're not lying exactly. They're just telling a very particular kind of truth. Real median household income in the United States has climbed from about $58,000 in 1995 to over $75,000 in 2022, measured in consistent dollars. That's the Census Bureau's data, showing a steady march upward. By every standard measure, American households are bringing home more purchasing power than they were a generation ago. But here's the critical part. Those dollars are real dollars, meaning they've already been adjusted for inflation using the Consumer Price Index. When we say real income rose 31% between 1999 and 2022, we're saying that after accounting for the rising price of everything, households still have 31% more buying power. At least that's the headline. That's the graph economists point to when they talk about progress. But let me introduce you to Malik. He's a project manager in Atlanta, 15 years into his career, married with 2 kids. Here's how he puts it, quote, "My title says mid-career professional, but daycare alone takes more than one full paycheck every month." Malik earns more than the median household income. He got a raise last year that beat inflation according to the official numbers, and yet somehow the math of his actual life doesn't add up to prosperity. So what's happening between the official inflation number and Malik's daycare bill? Let's look at specific costs since 2000. Household income rose 31% in real terms, but childcare rose 115%, according to the Center for American Progress. The average family health insurance premium that employers offer rose 138%, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. Notice something? The things that make middle-class family life possible. The ability to work while your children are cared for. The ability to get medical treatment without bankruptcy. These costs didn't just outpace wage gains. They outpaced them by a factor of 4 or 5. And here's where the first layer of complexity emerges. The Consumer Price Index includes healthcare and childcare in its basket, but it counts for them as small slices of an average household spending weighed by statistical averages. If you're actually living through those specific cost increases, the average becomes meaningless. You're not buying the average basket. You're buying the specific basket your life requires. And that specific basket is getting expensive in ways the headline number cannot capture. The Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity has built something different. They call it the True Living Cost Index. Instead of tracking an average basket weighed by what people spend, the TLC index tracks only necessities for the median worker. Just the basics. Housing, food, healthcare, transportation, childcare for those who need it. No entertainment, no dining out, no discretionary spending at all. Only what it takes to survive and participate in the economy. Their 2024 white paper landed like a depth charge. When you measure median worker buying power against this necessities-only basket, from 2001 to 2023, purchasing power didn't rise 9% as the official CPI suggests. It fell 5%. Let me say that again. By the official measure, we got 9% richer. By the measure of what basic life actually costs, we got 5% poorer. Picture two lines on a graph, starting at the same point in 2001. The official line rises gently over 2 decades, modest but steady progress. But the second line, the true living cost line, dips. 5% over 22 years, compounding every single year, taking a slightly bigger bite out of the margin between earning and surviving. This creates a feedback loop. When your necessities eat a larger share of your income each year, you have less left over to save. When you have less savings, you become more fragile. The survey of consumer finances for 2022 found that the median liquid savings for the bottom 60% of households was $3,000. And 37% of households spent more than they earned that year, meaning they were drawing down those tiny savings or going into debt only to maintain their baseline standard of living. The Federal Reserve asked a question in their annual survey that cuts straight to the bone. If you faced an unexpected $400 expense, could you cover it with cash or its equivalent? $400. And year after year, roughly 40% of the adults say no. They couldn't cover it without borrowing or selling something. This is what the diverging lines produce. Not poverty in the traditional sense. Most of these households are working, earning, paying taxes. But they're operating without a buffer. One broken appliance away from a financial spiral. Official statistics say we're progressing. The actual mechanics of household finance say we're becoming more precarious. Both things are true. And the system that produces this contradiction is starting to reveal itself. Now we go deeper into specific systems consuming those wage gains. Start with housing. In the 1990s, the typical American home cost about 3.2 times the median household income. By 2022, that ratio had climbed to 5.7. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies documented this, and you can see it in the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. Home prices tripled, while incomes didn't even double. So what happened? Supply restrictions happened. Researchers Edward Glazer and Joseph Giorco spent years analyzing zoning regulations and building codes across American cities. What they found was a systemic choking of housing supply in the places where jobs were growing. Single-family zoning preventing denser development. Environmental reviews stretching years. Community opposition blocking new construction. When wages rise, the housing market simply recaptures that gain through higher prices and rents. The wage increase flows directly into the landlord's income or a seller's asking price. The system absorbs the raise. Meanwhile, healthcare operates under its own logic. The average employer-sponsored family health insurance premium hit $23,968 in 2023. That's up roughly 5 times since 1999. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. Most workers never see that premium as a deduction from their paycheck. The employer pays it directly to the insurance company. So when economists say total compensation has kept pace with productivity, they're including that mushrooming health premium. But you can't spend the health insurance premium. It's gone before you even knew you earned it. The College Board's data showed that real in-state public university tuition rose 91% since 2000. When college costs rise, students borrow. When students borrow, they enter the workforce already burdened with debt that makes home ownership harder, which increases rent demand, which drives rents higher. One system's output becomes another system's pressure point. So let me introduce you to Sophia. She's a newly licensed nurse in Milwaukee, 3 years out of school. In her words, quote, "My raise covered the hospital's parking fee increase and nothing else." Sophia's experience reveals a pattern called Baumol-Bowen disease. Playing a Mozart quartet takes the same number of musicians today as it did in 1790. You can't make a nurse care for more patients without degrading care. You can't make a teacher teach more students effectively past a certain class size. But productivity in other sectors keep rising. To attract workers, the low productivity sectors must raise wages too, even without productivity gains. Those wage increases translate directly into price increases because there's no efficiency gain to absorb them. Healthcare, education, and childcare. The exact sectors families need to participate in modern economic life. Systemically outrun general inflation. Not because of greed, but because of the mathematical structure of how productivity-differentiated labor markets interact. These cost increases consume wage gains, redistributing income from workers to the providers of necessary services. The system feeds on itself. Now watch these separate systems interact, because that's where the real complexity lives. When the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates low, borrowing becomes cheap. Cheap mortgages help people buy homes, right? But cheap mortgages also mean investors can borrow cheaply to buy rental properties. They bid up housing prices, which raises rents, which consumes more of tenants' incomes, which makes it harder to save for a down payment, which keeps them renting longer. The wage increase meant to improve living standards get channeled directly into asset appreciation for those who already own property. Or consider student loans. Federal loan availability was supposed to make college accessible, but universities noticed that students could borrow more, so they could charge more. Researcher Gray Gordon found that expanding student loan availability could explain between 20 and 50% of tuition increases since the 1980s. The system designed to help students afford college ended up making college more expensive, which meant students needed bigger loans, which meant more debt, which meant less purchasing power for housing, which fed back into the rental market pressure. But there's something even more subtle happening. Dynamic pricing algorithms have made their way from airline tickets into everyday purchases. Researchers at MIT found that internet competition doesn't only lower prices, it increases price volatility. Retailers can adjust prices daily based on demand signals. Let me share something Jorge told me. He's an assistant manager at a grocery store in San Antonio, and he said, quote, "The labels change more often than the staff schedule. Here's the complexity paradox. Every nominal wage gain is an income stream for another node in the system that can reprice faster than wages can adjust. You get a raise in January. Your rent increases in February. Your insurance premium rises in March. College tuition jumps in August. The grocery algorithm reprices staples in real time. By December, the raise is gone. And because these systems operate independently, housing policy here, healthcare markets there, algorithmic pricing everywhere, there's no coordinating mechanism that says, wait, maybe we shouldn't recapture 100% of worker wage gains immediately. Each individual interaction feels fair. Your landlord's rent increase is reasonable by local market standards. Your insurance premium reflects actuarial risk. Your grocery store's prices match competitors. But the cumulative effect across all these systems simultaneously is a steady erosion of purchasing power, not through conspiracy, but through the emergent behavior of multiple feedback systems responding to the same input: more money in the workers' pockets, and optimizing their individual extraction without regard for systemic impact. This is the web. So where does this leave us? We've traced the path from cheerful income headlines through specific cost explosions, through feedback loops between housing, healthcare, education, and debt, all the way to algorithmic repricing systems that capture wage gains in real time. What we've discovered is that the traditional metric, real median household income adjusted by CPI, is measuring the wrong thing, is measuring money in without adequately measuring life out. Here's a different metric: the cost of thrive ratio. Not cost of living, because that implies mere survival. Thrive. The ability to work, raise children, get healthcare, build modest savings, and experience some economic security. The cost of thrive ratio would measure median disposable earnings, what's left after taxes and essential expenses, divided by the true living cost basket. And it would track whether the margin between earning and essential spending is expanding or contracting. My suspicion is that this ratio has been falling for 2 decades. We're earning more nominally, but the cost of thriving is rising faster, and the margin is getting thinner every year. What does seeing this web actually change? Instead of endlessly arguing about whether wages should be higher, which they should, but that's not sufficient, we should start asking about the systems that absorb wage increases. How do we increase housing supply in job-rich areas? How do we separate health insurance from employment so that premium increases don't invisibly consume compensation? How do we fund childcare as infrastructure rather than as a market service? These aren't levers you can pull tomorrow. But once you see the web, you stop accepting the headline numbers as the full story. You start asking your city council why they keep blocking multifamily zoning. You start asking your employer to show you total compensation, including the health premium, because that's your money even if you never touch it. You start questioning whether childcare should operate as a market at all. The insight doesn't hand you power, but it does alter the questions you ask. And that alteration, multiplied across millions of people who stop accepting the disconnect between statistical prosperity and lived precariousness, that might actually matter. Because right now, the policy debate accepts the premise that if real median income is rising, we're making progress. But we're not making progress if the cost of basic participation in middle-class life is rising faster. We're not making progress if every wage gain gets immediately recaptured. We're not making progress if the margin for error keeps shrinking. What we're doing is running faster on a treadmill that's accelerating and calling it economic growth. What changes once we stop measuring progress by the money and start measuring by the life that money must buy? This is Interconnected. See you in the next episode.